LaHare. I'm the chapter president of the Texas State University CEO Club, and I'm studying management with a concentration in entrepreneurship. Evelyn Echols became one of the first highly successful women entrepreneurs in the United States when she established International Travel Service. This was a commercial agency, and within a year, she already attracted several major accounts, including PepsiCo, NBC, RCA, and Westinghouse. She sold the agency and established Echols International Travel and Hotel Schools, which became known as the best travel schools in the United States, operating out of Chicago, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Approximately 40,000 students graduated from these schools. In the 1990s, both New York business owners and Chicago business owners named Evelyn Entrepreneur of the Year. She is also a member of the CEO Entrepreneurship Hall of Fame. She's also received many awards from several foreign countries for her work in creating goodwill among the nations through the means of travel. In addition to having served in several organizations and having hosted a TV series, she wrote a book titled, "They Said I Couldn't Do It, But I Did." She was the country's first woman to join Rotary International, and at the age of 97, Evelyn is still going strong and has built her career on a reputation for accomplishing the impossible. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Evelyn Echols.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, I'm sure one of the big questions in your mind today is, how am I going to get a job in this depressed market? Well, I have news for you. When things are tough, the tough get going. And that's what I expect from every one of you. I'm sure you're prepared. You have an education that warrants your being hired. And secondly, what I am concerned about and I want to know about, I had lunch recently with three CEOs at the Executive Club. And I threw a question out to them. What is your biggest problem in hiring people? And all three just quickly said, lack of entrepreneurial, or lack of communication skills. And they said they don't know how to carry on a good telephone conversation. They don't know how to meet people. They don't know how to write a good letter, etc. Now, I hope that doesn't apply to you, because it is your communication skills that is either going to take you to the top or fail to get you to the top. You must have good communication skills. I made up my mind the other day that if I asked a person a question and they answered in 3 words, I'm not going to talk to them again. Because it's a waste of time. Obviously, they can't communicate, and so I'm not going to learn anything from them, certainly. So I want you to be very careful. As a matter of fact, last year a group came to me and wanted me, you know, I am 97 years old, and they came to me and wanted me to start a communication school. And I thought seriously about it. Had I been a couple years younger, I would have done it. And I think if I were looking for a career today, I would start that kind of school. I think it would be very, very successful. So, you have both of those. If you have both of those, you're in business. So now I have 5 ideas for you getting a job in this market. The first one I'm going to recommend is I would say the first would be to volunteer. And I'll tell you why. because you're looking for a job, you have time anyway. And if you're a good volunteer, and if you have chosen the company you're going to volunteer for carefully, it can be very advantageous to you. Why? Because you're processed. So if a job opens up, they're going to hire you rather than looking for someone new. And so well, let's say I was interested in hospitals. Well, then I go and volunteer at a hospital. If I were interested in marketing, I'd probably go to the Art Institute or Tulare Opera. One of those organizations, they have marvelous marketing departments. Or if it was advertising, the same thing would be true. And then once I became engaged there, I would go to the heads of those departments and I'd say, you know, I really am in great admiration of your marketing or your advertising or whatever. And I would like very, very much to participate with you when you're going to be doing some marketing sessions. Could that possibly happen? I do it on my own time and at no cost to you. That would be very advantageous because then if that person likes you and decides he wants to hire you, he can, and you're already processed. You can start the next day. So that would be one of my first recommendations. The second thing I want to know, how are you dressing when you go for job interviews? The New York Times has just published a story in which they said the people being hired today in New York are people who are dressed, that the day of the casual, sloppy look is over. And so a person that comes dressed in a business suit, shirt, and tie, tie's not going to choke you to death in one day. And a woman in a business suit is much more apt to be hired than a person who comes in a pair of jeans. Keep that in mind. Now, you are going to send out a resume. I think the greatest waste of time in the whole world is sending out a resume to 100 companies. A resume should be personalized. If I were doing a resume, I would give my experience, but I also, number one, I would keep it witty, and number two, I would definitely talk about that company. I would say, I want to work for you. Why? He's going to ask, he, she are going to ask you why. And you better be prepared to answer. Why? Because I saw one of your ads the other day and I was very impressed with it. Or I went into one of the stores and I like the way you position your products, etc., etc., etc. You've got to be able to communicate an interest in that company. Therefore, I would never send the same resume out to 2 or 3 companies or up to 100. Nobody pays attention to those. So that would be the next thing. Now let's say that you have sent out that letter. And by the way, I hope you have taken the time to get the name of the person to whom you're writing, whoever the CEO is or whoever the head of employment is or whatever, vice president of sales, whoever it is, because just to send a thing that has no identity in today's world is not too smart. So, you're going to do that. And you really have a very good chance, if you're very careful, in how you address that. You have a very good chance of being hired. People are egoists. And if you have taken the time to find out their name, and what their title is, and what they've been doing in the last year in the way of special things, maybe special sales effort or whatever, they will be gratified. And you have a very good chance of being hired. I went all through. Right? Okay. Think he was here now?
I can.
I'm talking to myself.
Let's go over technical stuff.
Okay now? I'm ready to proceed. Okay. That is the next thing. Now, this is an era in which most jobs, a high percentage, are filled by recommendations from friends. Joe needs a job, Pete needs a job, Helen needs a job, so forth and so on. So, you want to broaden your base. That means that you want to join some clubs. Now here in Chicago, I would recommend something like the Chamber of Commerce. That's a very good organization, and one where you will meet many people. And every one of you, no matter where you come from, have organizations. You have women's organizations, you have city clubs, and all sorts of things. And yes, you pay a fee. It's worth it. It is worth it. Not to pay a huge fee, but I'm thinking of fees around $80, $90 a month, something like that. And what you want to do, if you do that, it doesn't pay at all just to become a member of the club. It only pays if you get on committees and you choose the committees that you particularly like. Do you like marketing? Do you like sales? Do you like finance? What is your interest? And you volunteer for those, and you become very active in that committee. You really dedicate time and effort. And the members will all get to know you this way. So every day that you go, every time you go to a meeting there, you're broadening your base. And I would say it is the fastest way to broaden your base. Now here, for an example, I would suggest things like the City Club. I would suggest the Convention Bureau. And in your, no matter where you come from, you have organizations of that kind, and that would be a strong recommendation to you. I'm going to now ask for 3 questions, so I know if I'm on the right track with you and what you would like to hear. Okay? May I have some questions? I can hardly see, but whoever is asking
You can
the
go.
question.
Go ahead.
I think a lot of us would really love to hear your story.
I'm sorry, but there were supposed to be a couple of people sitting up here who would relay what you're saying if I can't hear it.
question, please?
We want to hear her story.
Oh, they would like to hear your entrepreneurial story about how you established your travel business.
Okay, I will certainly tell you that. Another question?
I had one.
Yes.
I assume that you faced a lot of opposition being a woman entrepreneur at the time that you were, when you were establishing your business. So how did you deal with that opposition that you faced, let's say, in terms of most people being men that were entrepreneurs?
So how did you overcome the objections of being a woman and entrepreneurship?
I had no problem. Everything I ever wanted to do. This included friends, this included my husband of 44 years. No. Too many people, too many women, I'm sorry, used that as an excuse as to why they didn't get ahead. There was more wrong with them than that, or they'd have gotten ahead. Because I certainly, we're going back, my dears, to 1950. So you can imagine. Well, let's talk about the fact that when I opened my travel school in New York, I said, I'm going to open a travel school in New York, and it's going to be commercial. I'm not going to take any personal, I don't want any personal travel. I don't want to send you on your vacation or anything. I'm only going to handle corporate. And everybody laughed at me. They said, you're competing with American Express and the big boys. I said, I know that. So I had great difficulty in getting rental space because nobody thought I'd be in business for more than 6 months. So they were offering me 6 months contracts. The airlines would not give me ticket stock in my office. I had to send over to their office to pick up ticket stock. That was very difficult. And so I'm a great believer in anything that goes out from your office should be first class, even if you can't afford it. We find a way to afford it. And so I had a brochure printed up talking about this new agency and this location and so forth and so on. And every morning, I would come into my neighborhood, and of course at that time you could do this. You could walk in and out of office buildings, no one stopped you. And I used to go to an office, and I would have with me a dozen roses. And I would go into an office, and I would say to the receptionist, would you do me a favor? Would you see that this brochure gets on the top of the mail going into the boss's office? And they'd take the rose, and they swore they would do so. And so nothing much happened. I got a couple little things until one day a man called me, and his name was Bernie Rillen. And he said, we're right near here, and therefore I'm interested in what you have to say. If you can deliver tickets very quickly to us, I'd be very interested. Well, it was a horrible account. They had no international travel, and all they wanted was a TWA flight. Flight 1 going out, Flight 2 coming back between New York and Los Angeles. And on TWA, and they had sleepers, 4 sleepers, and the fight for those 4 sleepers was incredible. So the reason I was interested in the account, I looked it up, and he handled PepsiCo worldwide, public relations firm. So I thought, well, he's going to get whatever he wants, no matter how difficult it is. And we began servicing him, and in about 6 months, something happened. He called one morning, he said, I think you can get some Pepsi business. I said, I've been waiting to hear that. And he said, Alan Steele, chairman of the board of Pepsi, is marrying the famous, and at that time, the most famous, Joan Crawford, movie star. And they're trying to get on the United States, the new line, the American liner, for their honeymoon in Europe. And the travel agents are not able to get them on. So I go back to my office and I call the United States line, and I said, I'm going to be down there every morning. So I went down every morning, early. And at that time, the bookers who were handling Steve had great big books. So I went in with them, and what I was doing, I was helping them open mail. We were looking for cancellations. The ship was completely 100% sold out. So nothing was happening. It was looking very gloomy. It was possibly 2 weeks out from sailing. And so they didn't know that while I was talking to them, I was writing down the names of the people who had the suites I needed. There were only 4 suites on that ship that Steele would use. And I still remember the numbers, U80, 82, 84, and 86. And so, this day, a small suite was returned. And I said, I want an option on that suite. And he said, Steele would never use that. I said, just give me an option till 2 o'clock this afternoon. So they said, well, it's a waste of time, but do it. So I went back to my office, and I forgot that it was 3 hours earlier in Wyoming than it was in New York, and I woke a man up. And I said, Mr. So-and-so, you're standing in the way of my whole career. And he laughed. He said, how could I be doing that? I don't even know you. I said, oh, but you will. And he said, what can I do for you? I said, you're voting U-8082 on the August sailing of the United States. And I desperately need that suite. Now I've got one that's not nearly as good, but if you will trade with me, I will pay for yours. I figured this is a very small donation for picking up PepsiCo. So he waited a minute and finally came back and said, I don't really care where I am. He said, you can have it, providing you promise me that when I board ship, I'll get to meet Joan Crawford. I said, oh, yes. Yes, sir, you will meet Joan Crawford. So I called Mr. Steele's office, and I said, I have your suite. Well, first I called the line and told them they couldn't believe I had it, and so they checked it. And so I called Mr. Steele, and he came on, and he said, I don't believe you. I said, Mr. Steele, please believe me, because I'm coming over for money. And so I went in, we Secretary Dorothy took me into him, and he said, "Do you mind if I call the line?" And I said, "No." He said, "Okay. I want you to tell me how you stole that suite from my travel department and all of the travel agencies that were working on it." I told him what I had done. He had a very good sense of humor, and he said, "Well, I congratulate you." And he called Dorothy in and he said, "If she's smarter than my travel department, she deserves the account." And he wrote me a letter, which I still have, which says, "Evelyn Echols has the Pepsi-Cola account worldwide as of today." He said, "Take this down to my travel department, they'll be very annoyed." So I did. Amazing, you know, she was terribly tough to get along with, terribly tough. Maybe some of you read her book, the book by her daughter. To me, she was wonderful. She could not do enough for me. Once she realized that I was going to take good care of her, she became my fan. And she brought me the NBC account, the RCA account, and the Grace Kelly wedding, when Grace Kelly was getting married and going on. Joan could never do enough for me, so I was very blessed there. So that's how I started that. So everybody said I couldn't do it. That's why I wrote a book. I hope some of you will buy. Because everybody that buys it, I love this, say, it gives me hope. It gives me hope, and it gives me a sense that I can get out there and do it. And that's what I wanted it to do. So I hope when I'm out there signing books that you'll buy one. It'll be the best in 18 bucks you ever invested. Okay. So that is, what was the other question that I didn't answer yet?
Was there one more question that we had? That was just two.
I have a question. What advice do Ms. Echols have for young entrepreneurs that would like to enter the travel industry?
So what advice do you give young entrepreneurs that want to enter the travel industry?
Oh, don't enter the travel. Yeah. By the seat of their pants. There's no service anymore. No, this is not the time to go in the travel industry. Now, on the other hand, the hotel industry, yes, I would say very definitely. I think if I were going back in, I might like to become a travel agency booking the big hotels around the world. They still are paying top commission, and there's a lot of them out there. So that I would do, but no, this, you know, you're going to have to wait a few years to go back to the travel business. I was in it when it was at its best. They paid us high commissions, and I traveled all over the world, and I had an awfully good time. Very good time. So that's another thing. When you're in business, if you don't like it, get out of it. Because you're only good at something you really, really enjoy. I never counted how many hours were in a day when I ran the travel business. And then when my husband was in advertising and he was asked if he'd like to come to Chicago for a couple of years. And at that time, I was also doing a television show on travel called It's Fun to Travel, 6 days a week. And I would say, are they telling me they can't hear me again?
You're good.
You're good.
What?
You're good.
You're good.
No problem.
We can hear you.
I can keep going. So actually, I'm just elated to get out of New York because I was really overworking at that time. And I got out here and I said to my husband, I'm just going to do nothing. And he said, I don't think so. I don't think that's true. And suddenly I came in one night and I said, what would you think of me opening a school on travel and hotel? He said, I don't think it's too good an idea. I said, well, I'm going to try it. I said, I'll try for 6 months. If it's not showing any signs of success, I'll get out. So I didn't want to rent office space. I went to my friends in the hotel that I had made in the hotel business, at the Hilton especially, and I said, I want to rent classrooms in the evening, and I want to run evening classes, and I want my teachers to be middle-class management in the hotel industry and travel industry, so that when they graduate, you people will hire them because you have trained them. And so that's the way I started. And at the end of 6 months, I had a waiting list. I had a waiting list for every class. So that was a 35-year career. And I said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give 10 scholarships a year to public schools if they recommend a top student to me. And they did, and that worked very well. And I found that kids who were doing terribly bad in the public school came into our school and they immediately realized they couldn't fool around. We locked their classroom door at 9 o'clock in the morning. They had to be on time, and they became excellent students. So that was another adventure. Now, if somebody wants to become an entrepreneur today, and that's a good question, because yes, if you have the personality of an entrepreneur knows we're egomaniacs. We know that whatever we're selling is the best product in the whole market. And so, for that reason, nobody would be able to unsell them on what they want to do. And what you want to do, if you want to be an entrepreneur, I want to know what your product is. Have you researched this product? Have you conducted any focus panels? Have you gone online and found out who your competition is for that product? And so forth, before you go any further. And you do not invest heavily in a new product like that. The main thing that you've got to spend money on is advertising and your marketing. And everything you do should be first class. Absolutely first class. But I would hope that you would be able to work out of your home, not to have to rent office space. And the second thing is that you have 2 or 3 telephones and you personally answer the phone, not leaving a message. I'm not in my office today. I will leave a message. We'll call you back next week or a week from Monday or something. That's not the way to get business. The way to get business is that you do answer the phone. I always answered my phone. I found that if I pick up my phone maybe 5 or 6 times a day, instead of letting someone else pick it up, I learned a tremendous amount. And I got some advantages that I wouldn't have had I not done that. You've got to be able to budget yourself. And if you think you're going to spend, I don't know, you're going to spend $10,000, $20,000, always add another 10. Because there are going to be expenses that come up that you haven't dreamed of. And all too often, I've seen, I went around the country speaking for the Secretary of Labor, I guess it was, and I found that so many times, and especially with women, they would start a business and they would budget it, and about the time it was going to make a turnaround, they were out of money. And so you've got to budget for more money than you think you're going to spend. And that's not hard to do, not hard to do. And another thing, entrepreneurs, in my estimation, should not have partners. No 2 of them are going to think exactly alike, and neither one of them are going to cave in on their idea. And so, if you have to borrow money, I would hope you could borrow it on the basis that you can buy them out at the end of 6 months, or that you can take it just as a loan, whatever. But I would hope you didn't have to give stock. I would hope that you own that company yourself. There's nothing better than knowing that you own your own company and you can make your own decisions and nobody can change your mind, because that's not what an entrepreneur is. Entrepreneurs aren't easy to change. So, okay, now questions. I'm ready for 2 or 3 more.
Out of all your adventures, which one would be your favorite?
Out of all of your adventures, which one was your favorite? Which one was your favorite business adventure, travel experience?
Both of them. I loved the travel business when I was in it. I traveled as a sailor all over the world. But when I opened the travel school, I became completely intrigued with it. And it proved to be, I opened it here in Chicago, and then I opened it in Washington, D.C., and it was equally successful. So then I went on and opened it in San Francisco, and it was equally successful. So I graduated here in Chicago, about 12,000 graduates, and about 10,000 in Washington, and I think around 10,000 in San Francisco. And the thing that I love now, I hardly ever walk down Michigan Avenue that somebody doesn't run up to me and say, "Hey, I'm one of your graduates." You know, you got 12,000 of them running around here. You're bound to run into a few. So that is very good. And I still consult with some of them. They call me when they're in trouble. And we talk about ways to get out of trouble. And there are ways of getting out of trouble. you know, I want to tell you something. You're at a very advantageous age, and I'll tell you why. When things run smoothly, your brain doesn't have to work. But when things are tough, you do have to work. And I find, well, as I say, I worked all through the Great Depression. I worked through several recessions. I always was able to find work. I'll tell you another thing. I would look at an ad. I went into New York for a one-week vacation. And I walked down Broadway the first night with my friend. I was mesmerized. I had been living by an oil lamp. And here I was, Broadway, with its magnificent lights and signs and glamorous people. And I turned to my friend, I said, I'm never leaving here. And I didn't for 35 years. I kept telling my parents I'll come home next month. And finally they no longer believed me, and rightfully so. And New York was so kind to me. I was very fortunate. When I decided to stay in New York, I went back to the hotel, the little hotel we were staying, and I asked the desk clerk, how do you get a job in New York? And he said, I'll give you the Sunday New York Times one ad. There was my job. I had had 2 years nurses training, and so this ad was for a small hospital on 57th and Lexington. And it said, no experience necessary if graduated from this course. And so I went over, and I opened the door, and there must have been 100 people there. And I said to myself, you might as well all go home, because this is my job. And that's the attitude I always took when I went out on a job. It's my job, my job. So the woman who was interviewing us, I said to her, you'd make a terrible mistake if you didn't hire me. And she said, oh, really? Tell me why. And I said, I gave her all the reasons I thought. There were good reasons. And the main thing, you smile. A smile will get you wonders. And you smile every time you're being interviewed or any time you're talking to anybody about it. You show your teeth. And so she said, when we were through talking, she said, I'll let you know. And I didn't think she was very positive. But the next morning, sure enough, she called me and hired me. And so I moved into the Lexington Hotel, which is where all women stayed at that time, because men could not get above the first floor. And you have no idea what happened. The top models were living there. Choo-Choo Johnson, Honey Child Wilder, wonderful names. And they took a look at this hick from the country and decided I needed a complete overhaul. And so that's when I got my first check. They took me down to the wholesale market, and I picked out some clothes, and then they took me to their hairdresser. And then they started taking me to parties where I was meeting people I would see in the newspaper, and I had no idea who they were. And I liked again very fast in New York. And I kept watching for what I wanted. I wanted a job in the travel business, and that had been instilled in me from early years I had an aunt who was a missionary in China, and she came home for a sabbatical to the farm, and the other one was teaching at the Sorbonne in Paris. And at night, at that time, children were seen and not heard. I would go over to my grandfather's house, and I would sit on the porch while they sat and discussed all their travels for the year. And I kept saying to myself, I'm going to see those places someday, yes I am. And sure enough, I did. And so there was an ad in the paper. It said, wanted an international advertising agency wishes someone to handle executive travel. No experience necessary. I went down and applied for it, and I got the job. And so I was on my way. I went to a travel agency and made a deal with them that they would work with me. I was booking mostly people to Latin America because they had offices in Rio and Buenos Aires and so forth. And the amazing part of the whole thing was that there were so many good-looking guys running around. And they were back and forth to all parts of Latin America. I didn't learn until much later that we were a cover-up for the FBI, and they were all FBI agents.
That's awesome.
So, how much time do I have left? What's he saying?
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Is that what he said?
She can go over it.
Well, that's not perfect. I've talked that long. Now, I'm going into the reception that they're having, and I'm going to be signing books, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. What? Oh, yes. I do have a website. Or anytime I can be helpful to you. I also always kept myself very available. There's a phone book, people can look me up. A man called me about, I guess 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, and he said to me, I had to call you because you kept me up all night. And I said, well, sir, it's a long time since a man has said that to me.
She did. I love her sense of humor.
And I couldn't put it down. I read it all night, and I finished it this morning. And that's what most people tell me. They read it all night, and then what they tell me is this, that they get up in the morning, and they say, I can do things I didn't know I could do. And if I can instill that in you, that would be wonderful. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Good luck to everybody.